What's up? What's up? Rock and roller, Mr. J. Curtis Strickland. Today in the house, we have the guitar player of 108, the guitar player slash singer of Project Kate from back in the day, and one of the co-founders of MANTRALOGY Records, Ms. Keli Lalita. How are you today?
I'm good. That was a dramatic
Outstanding.
introduction.
Well, I gotta dap everyone up, and you deserve all the credit, definitely.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about you and where you come from and where are you from originally? What are your did you grow up in a musical family? How did you get involved in hardcore?
So I actually grew up pretty close to Albany, which is where I live now again. Um, and I grew up in a family that was really, I grew up with just mainly living with my mom. And my mom was kind of like a back to the land hippie type of I shouldn't say was, I should say is, because that's still kind of what she's like. So I had that. And then um, where I lived, there was like New York City people bought houses in the area because I lived near the Catskills. So my first introduction to like hardcore music came from a woman. She's a woman now, but at the time we were both kids. I was actually 8 when I met her, and she was 14, and she seemed like it's the coolest older teenager, and she was actually, and she was the one that really got me into hardcore music. That's how I found out about it. Otherwise, I'm not sure how growing up in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York you would ever be exposed. But she had like vinyl of different things, and she played Beastie Boys for me when they were a hardcore band, and got me into all kinds of punk music and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I grew up here. My family is like this ultra leftist. My dad is like a civil rights attorney, and my stepmom is, they both do work for like the Innocence Project. And so I had, kind of punk rock roots, I guess, although it never quite manifests exactly like, I don't think they were expecting me to do it the way I did it. That's how it is. But yeah. So it wasn't like, it was a little hard to rebel actually, because they actually got so much right. But, you still have your like things you got to work out on your own when you're a teenager. So.
Sure. How did you get involved in Krishna Consciousness? Was that through the punk rock and hardcore scene as well?
Yeah, totally. Like basically, you know, I, you kind of were in proximity to devotees. You knew about Cro-Mags, and you kind of knew there were like Krishnas in the hardcore scene. And so I was interested in straight edge, and that was like one step closer to being a devotee. But it wasn't totally new to me because my mom had taken me to the Vivekananda ashram, which was really close to my house in this little town of Southwesterlo. So I had had some exposure to the universal form of Krishna, and I really was like attracted to it, but I kind of just didn't really have anything to do. I didn't know what to do with that attraction. And then I was friends with the person who is my husband now, and so Ray Capo Raghunath. So after one CBGB's matinee, they had it was after the Youth of Today tour, so they had gotten the books, they gotten Bhagavad Gita, and after the show they said, meet me at the temple, to the Brooklyn Temple, or meet us at the Brooklyn Temple to get a ride home to upstate. So that was the very first time I went to the temple, and they were brand new devotees, and they pretty much like preached to me the entire drive up the Taconic. And it's funny thinking back because I didn't know that much, but they whatever they knew, they told me. And I went to a Waldorf school, and I think this was when I was in 10th grade, and just the American transcendentalists who, as you know, were, or maybe you don't know, were very influenced by Vedic understanding. In fact, I was just reading how Thoreau's, the very first time Hinduism was presented to the Western audience was in the living room of Henry Thoreau's widow. So he must have died by then. And then she had, I can't remember which Swami, but it was late 1800s. She had this Hindu Swami come and like talk about Hinduism. So I kind of knew about the transcendentalists, the American transcendentalists who all read Bhagavad Gita. So it wasn't completely and entirely foreign to me. I had like this kind of crossover thing always going on. So I made the tea like you suggested, by the way.
Yeah, well, I mean, considering the show, it's pretty appropriate, which I actually don't drink much tea, so
Well,
um,
this is
well,
good. It's rooibos tea. It's really good. You should try
oh,
it.
that's so good. And
Mm.
that was one of my services when I was down in Gainesville was I didn't do it all the time, but I served the tea, the rooibos tea, which was a really awesome service. And something I really enjoyed was living in the temple. Was that something that you did? Did you ever have a temple
I
tenure?
did. Yeah, yeah. Yep. I think I was like almost the last generation of, or maybe one of the last devotees from the hardcore scene that actually moved into the temple and actually lived in the ashram. Then we kind of busted it open for this, like the people immediately following me, like never lived in the temple, but I lived at Gita Nagri, which for the first, like I basically then, I kind of reconnected with my husband, and then, I mean, he wasn't my husband, he was just like a friend. I got back into Krishna consciousness like when I was in
Steve Reddy,
college.
right?
Yeah. And
Mhm.
he brought me to 26 Second Avenue. He was kind of blooped out, but like barely. At that time, like either you were like a brahmachari or you were blooped. There was no like bhakti 2.0. It was like you were in or you were out, and if you were out, you were shunned. But he kind of just hung in there, and we went to the Brooklyn Temple. We went to 26 Second Avenue. First, he went there by himself, and I was like pissed. I was like, "Where are you going without me? Like, just bring me. Are you like embarrassed?" And then, because Satsuru Maharaj was there, and then I got interested, and so I said, "Can we go to the Brooklyn Temple?" And we went to the Brooklyn Temple again. I'd been there the one time when I was like 14 or something, and then I was like, "Oh, this is like I really like this." So, what was your question again, so I can remember? Oh yeah, so then I
Did
moved
did
into
you
the
did you
Brooklyn.
stay in the temple?
Yes,
Did
I did.
because I know a lot of, one of my god brothers was actually he was kind of envious of me because I got to do the living in the temple and whatnot.
Yeah, I did. I
And
lived on.
it was
Yeah,
a really great time in my life. So yeah, if you just
yeah.
want to, kind of
Mm.
if you just want to kind of reflect on that
Yeah, yeah.
and
I can.
what you
We'll
enjoyed
go.
about
Yeah,
it.
so I lived in the Brooklyn Temple while I was in college, and then that summer after being in, because I was at the New School in New York City, and then I moved to the Philadelphia Temple for a summer, and then yeah, I lived in the Brooklyn Temple. I went to Vrindavan. I took the spring semester off and lived in the Philadelphia Temple all the way till the Shelter 108 tour. But I would say, like, I hear a lot of guys from my generation being like, it was the greatest time in my life. Well, I'm pretty sure if I was a guy, I would say that, but I would not say that as a female, because it was going from this like, basically like the beginning of the era of like feminism and punk rock to like being really literally like a person that stood in the back of a room. Like, as much as people said, "Oh, it wasn't really that big," it was really weird. It was like it was really
Mm.
like I was like, okay, I guess I'm in this back of this room and like going second on everything, like whether it's still like I still realize like how strange it is that like when they pass the Geewick around or something, they go to all the men, and then after those guys are all done, then they come to the women, and it's like those are interesting, subtle, like microaggressions against a female body. And at the same time, if you're studying anything, you're studying Bhagavad Gita, and you're studying the second chapter. The entire thing is, the whole, you know, one could say that the whole establishment of Krishna consciousness and the Bhagavad Gita are built on this concept that you're not the body, and yet you're living in the temple very much, in a very gendered society, where the women have, at the time, and this has changed a lot since then, but in the 90s, I couldn't lead a kirtan. I could not teach a Bhagavatam class. I was never asked to do any of those things. And meanwhile, the guys, Raghunath and all those, they're getting the red carpet rolled out to them, and I'm getting sent to fold towels. And it was extra weird for me because like my mother is an intellectual, my stepmother is a professor at the law school, and I was like, you know, it was kind of like, am I really doing this? Am I really like allowing myself to be subjected to like subjugation? And at the time, I there didn't seem like any options, so I just sort of like didn't take it seriously in some ways, but in some ways it deeply affected me, and I'm still kind of trying to unpack all of that was. So, um, yeah, so I was going to ask you about the rumors of chauvinism, but there you go.
Oh yeah, Ben NG's got a question, which Lori Dawn is here, by the way, from Women of the
Yeah,
Pit. Love her. She
yes.
came on the show, her and Gina, not too long ago. But
Oh,
yeah, Ben
cool.
NG
Yeah.
says, I was going to ask you about the rumors of chauvinism in Krishna, but didn't want to be disrespectful.
No, I think it's like, at a certain point, the has to like face, you know, the reality of, and it's interesting now because I'm currently in graduate school, which I always wanted to go to, but I moved into the temple, so I didn't do it. And then I had kids, so I didn't do it. And now I'm like 51 and I'm writing a master's thesis basically on this topic. Like, what is the cause of, of misogyny in the bhakti world? And why is it even there? Is it a result of, you know, white Western men trying to maintain some type of authenticity, and they associate that. I mean, I'm doing anthropology, so there's a whole theory in anthropology by like one of the feminist anthropologists. She wrote an essay called "Man is to society as woman is to nature" or something. I can't remember the exact quote, but basically that women's bodies are meant to be like the seat of traditional values, and therefore they're kept in these traditional roles. And you can see this pretty much across religions. I mean, if you want to look at, if you look at, for instance, like in Albany, there's the Bruderhof, who are like semi like this thing. If you don't know who the Bruderhof are, it's something like the Amish, and the women dress in like clothes that look like they're Amish, and the men just wear normal clothes. And if you look
Hmm.
at a lot of sects of Judaism or Christianity, it's the women who maintain their traditional clothing and the bodily gestures, and there's expectation and the imagery of the society that women hold the space of that. So it's a little freaking weird to go from being like a hardcore kid to that, and like
Sure.
and you're kind of like, do I need to do this? But at the time there was, obedience is a form of social currency in any ashram society. So um, you kind of adhere. But then it occurred to me at one point that that was just a decision I was making. And it turned out you could do whatever you wanted and rebel pretty hard and ultimately like still be around as I am. I don't think
Sure.
I'm not everyone's favorite, but that's why 108 was so great, because we were like the holding that space of this, like, we weren't towing the party line like ever. We never did it.
Sure.
So it gave me a chance. And yet I believe that all of us are quite deep bhaktas. It didn't ruin our Krishna consciousness. It ruined our ability to fit in within the institution, and not entirely. I mean, most of my friends are Hare Krishna devotees, and I
Sure.
still feel like I am too. But I just, there weren't opportunities for me really, and within the society, it wasn't just that there weren't opportunities, it was that there were people actively working hard to make sure that we didn't get opportunities. And the tide has really turned on that. But that's due to us like slugging it out, like left, right, and center nonstop for many years, I think. That's one of the
Um,
causes of the change.
to kind of reflect upon that a little bit, I served as a brahmachari in the temple for 2 years.
Yeah.
And if the Colombian girls came in the kitchen when I was doing service, it was over. My mind was completely agitated. And so, do you think that maybe some of the uh, quote unquote systems that were in place may have, we also have to mention that most of the devotees are celibate, and so do you think that sometimes you could look at it from a perspective of they are in place for mutual protection of both the male and the female devotees.
No, I don't think they are. I think they're I think they're in place because the man's spiritual path is considered to be the responsibility of women instead of the responsibility of the guy. Like, I was never agitated by the men or the brahmacharis. And if I actually just never was, but I would assume that if I was, that would be my job. But there was an assumption in the society that it was also my job to make sure that the brahmacharis weren't agitated, and it was never considered to be their job. And so
Hmm.
that's just this like idea that women are the object and the men are the subject. So the men have agency and the men have theirs. And this is very common cross culturally, cross religious society. Like, even if you have something like tantra, where there's, like all kinds of crazy like sexual rites, the women become the receptacle of the man's spiritual advancement. It's nothing about the women. Like, whatever they're doing, it's not for them. It's for the, so the brahmachari ashram, like, they it was for the advancement of the boys. It had nothing, like, no one cared about my advancement. They just assumed that if I was agitating the boys, that was my problem. No one thought, oh, maybe the boys should be checking their own agitation, which is their
Right.
responsibility. And I don't agree. I think, like, if you look at the demographics of Krishna consciousness, there's a heavy emphasis on celibacy as a way toward a type of power, but it's not what most people are. Like, if the demography of ISKCON, and I've just very heavily researched this, is it's mostly actually grihastas. There's some brahmacharis in the temple and there's some sannyasis, but if you look at, like, if you just go to a Sunday feast, and there was a lot of benefit for men to be brahmacharis, but there wasn't even a brahmacharini ashram. It wasn't even like, we kind of, there wasn't even that available to us. So there was I think a real sort of imbalance in that. And yet I do also appreciate that if you have young boys and girls living together in the temple, that can be dicey, but I never saw any of the rules actually work. And they very much persecuted the women, as like, you were basically, especially if you were a white woman, if you were an Indian woman, that was actually a little helpful, because Indian women were viewed as more traditional and therefore they were more chaste. Or if you were a white woman, all this like totally like totally untrue like concept that you were just like a sexual being trying to like distract the brahmacharis. I was like, homie, that is the furthest thing from my mind. I am not all about that. I want to study the Bhagavad Gita and teach it. And there was,
Sure.
and like, I think certain things were weaponized against women. So you had this situation where, like, if you wanted to teach class, then suddenly some brahmachari or some sannyasi was there protecting you. But really, when it came down to it later, when we got older, and you had women who were married and then basically, their husband left them, no one was protecting those women. They were like on their own to raise the children and, make money, and sometimes even support their husband, who was like in ex-husband, who's like off in India. Like, so I mean, just being very honest about it, I do feel like that is just sort of, it's not particular to ISKCON per se, but it was definitely, yeah. I mean, like, why when the Colombian girls come in the kitchen, just being themselves, why is that their responsibility to not distract you from?
Not saying that they ever did
That's your
anything
mind.
wrong, but
That's
like,
nothing to them.
you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, when you're in close quarters, and just speaking for myself as a male-bodied devotee,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
just knowing kind of the nature of men, it is difficult,
Exactly.
and that's, hence why I didn't stay brahmachari,
Yeah.
but
But it's
you know,
interesting that
uh,
women would be held responsible for the nature of men, isn't that? Isn't that an
no, no, no,
interesting
no.
thing?
I don't feel that they are. I guess my
Oh, they
kind
are.
of
They 100%
my
are. I'm
question
gonna
would
have to fight
be,
you on that one.
no, I'm asking objectively. I'm saying that,
Yeah.
you know uh, that, by nature, I think man wants to find a mate, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that you know, we have certain dispositions, and we have certain, you know, biological ways that we function. And, you know, when you're trying to maintain celibacy, it can be a little bit difficult.
Right, but whose
Yes,
responsibility is that difficulty?
what's that?
I said, but so that I'm not, from an anthropological perspective, I can say that I could actually say that most of what you're describing is actually like a societal expectation, not like a nature. That's a little different. But I'm asking you, in whose responsibility is that, so I would say
I mean, it's
unfairly in
ultimately the man.
ISKCON,
I
women were
mean,
held
I would
responsible
say.
for that. Well, no, I think it's, this has been like a thing I've been trying to express and explain, that, the celibacy is on the, it should be on the individual. It shouldn't be on the, it should be an internal choice and an internal thing to maintain. It shouldn't be, and if you have trouble, then you can remove yourself, but it's not fair to assume that women are the problem. And it was very much how it was presented. And that I find,
This was
I
back
think
in
we
the
can,
day.
I think it's still a little true now. I just think and I think the whole thing stems from the idea that women are objects. And instead of having any subjective agency, that I'm saying, this is how I feel, this is my experience. And it was like very
Sure.
much like this concept that women are this, women are this, women are this, and I was like, no, none of that is true about me, So, and at the same time, women were held responsible for the spiritual paths of men, and the opposite was not. I didn't experience that to be true at all. I was on my
See.
own to figure it out. I wasn't given, I wasn't given opportunities. And now it's very much shifted, but I think that is true in my area, in this world that we're in, and I don't think that's true all over the globe, which we have a global movement. So I think there's still some work to be done, and I really think that when we get to the place, not just as an ISKCON society, but as a global society where we don't think of women as objects anymore, that's when the real change can come. And then that's like, if you're not thinking of the women as objects, then they wouldn't agitate you ever. That's just how it
Uh,
is.
well, no. Well, okay. So, all right. You know, I know, and this is one thing that, you know, I have a disagreement with on my Christian friends is I think that, you know, they don't talk about like the divine feminine of, you know, Jesus or Christ or anything. That there's no component to that whatsoever. You know, the
I
fact
mean,
that
there is, it's just that a lot of Christians don't
right,
emphasize it.
they don't talk
There is Mother
about.
Mary, and there is there's very clearly, like, the Holy Spirit is very clearly Prana Shakti. Like, if you look back at old texts, and that is the goddess also. So there's actually options for that, but they just, because of patriarchal, trying to maintain patriarchal things, they don't. And this kind of gets really right for the most part, because there is this concept that the divine feminine has this, place in the hearts of the devotees. And I really do think that, I mean, I love to go really, really like far in that direction, which is, it's funny because it freaks some people out. And I'm like, it's a
I was gonna say
goddess.
a lot of this sounds like, you know, it would be kind of, you know, counter to traditional ISKCON thinking. Do you ever catch flack for that, or I'm saying this not as an ISKCON devotee.
Yeah.
What you were saying about, you know, being kind of shunned and removed. I'm in that position right now, so
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's a lot of the way that I feel about, you know, the way that ISKCON operates, and you know, in the past,
Well, it
you know,
depends on
just the
where you
way.
are. So, like, if you go to Vrindavan, for instance, how do people
Mhm.
greet each other in Vrindavan? Do you know?
Well, I've
Do you
been to
remember?
Vrindavan, but I don't. I mean,
What do
it's
people
not.
say
They
when they
say
pass you in a rickshaw? Or, like, if you go to the shop, what do they say? Do you remember?
I haven't spent enough
They
time in
say
Vrindavan.
Radhe
I don't
Radhe.
remember.
Radhe
Oh,
Radhe is the
Radhe
greeting.
Radhe. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're greeting you with the name of the divine feminine. And that's all of Vrindavan. And in Vrindavan, it's Radhastami. That's the big holiday, even more so than Krishna Janmashtami. And all of the secret pastimes of Srimati Radharani are very much like oral tradition parts of Vrindavan. And so what is the highest place that we want to attain as devotees is living and dying in Vrindavan. And that's a place where, Radha and the gopis and all of that are so much, Radha is the queen of Vrindavan. And so I think it's just about, I think there's anybody Western brings in certain things from their Judeo-Christian upbringing, and then it's very hard to translate that culturally to really understanding, deeply understanding what Bhakti Yoga is. And so, yeah, I catch flack for it, but that's the least of my flack catching. And I just decided that, sometimes you have to catch a little flack to get to the heart of things, and it's okay. And there was one ISKCON Swami, I won't name him because he probably doesn't. He said to me one time, just looked at me really seriously and said, "It's better to ask for forgiveness than to beg for permission." Mm-hmm. And I was like, I've heard that I'm gonna go. Yeah, let's see. As a middle-aged hardcore,
as a middle-aged
hardcore kid,
this. Yeah. I'm into the mindfulness aspect of it, though.
Actually, interestingly enough, mindfulness comes from Buddhism. But let me, just for the middle-aged hardcore, because it seems like kid, there is something that Krishna Consciousness did for all of us, and this is probably true for you, which is that you come to this space of existential crisis. And this is what hardcore does so well. It talks so much about the existential crisis of the material world is so frustrating. And, every song is about getting stabbed in the back by friends and struggling in the streets and whether, all this strife and struggle. And Krishna Consciousness and all of the sort of what are called moksha traditions are traditions of Eastern philosophy, you could say, including Buddhism is a moksha tradition. They offer answers. They give you answers to why this is happening. What the society does and how they bundle it up has nothing to do with the beautiful philosophy. So, it could be that.
And I agree with you there, totally.
Yeah, so it could be that you have some Swami yammering to you because you're a woman and you're not hitting all the societal women markers, and you're not adhering to being the best brahmachari, and but in the end, and this is actually part of what I studied because I wanted to understand despite all of this, why do so many people stay? Because you could talk about all the struggles of living in community and the material world stuff of the society, and it's women as an object is not attractive and all of that. But the reason people stay, the reason people join, number one reason is because they like the food, which is very interesting. This is from 20 years of sociological study. And the number one reason why they stay, even if it's a struggle and all of this stuff and you're fighting, is because of the community and the practices. So the practices of chanting, which is related to mindfulness a little bit. It's just a different, Buddhism and Hinduism brush up against each other. But it actually does something to make people's lives better. That's why I'm still here. My life is better because I have Krishna consciousness. My life is better because, in another hour and a half from now, a whole bunch of people, and they're not all Krishna devotees, but now we've branched out, and there are people from the Neem Karoli Baba tradition, and there's Pushti Marg people, and there's some Amma people, and we all get together on a Sunday night, and we sit together, and we sing, and we meditate, and then we eat together, and all of those things make people's lives better, actually. There's and hardcore, because this is kind of related to hardcore. Hardcore does that really well too. What do people do?
Yeah.
Why do people love it? You get together, you sing together. There's someone singing, there's someone holding out the mic. So you're singing. It's kind of like the same idea of kirtan, of like call and response. People know the same words, they have the same intention. They want something that's counter to American mainstream culture. And so it fulfills, it checks those same boxes, you know? So that's why people do it. And there's objectification happening all over, you know, like women are fighting objectification. It's like, it's just, we have generations and generations and generations of this. Like, we're doing great, all things considered, you know, like all things considered, we're doing great. And, you know, I'm not going to not be honest about my experience, because I feel like it's really important and imperative that to make changes within the society, to make it better for all the people, women, men, brahmachari, people, you know, people that are celibate, people that are non-binary, all of those people, they all want to, they want to get together. They want to have the joy of the practices and the, you know, eating food together and being together. That's like, people want that. You know, there should be no barrier to that. And I think that, unfortunately, because people have egos and power things and social hierarchies, sometimes some people go away, and that's really sad, you know. But there should be no outside. There should be no out and in, you know. Like, we should just everyone
Sure.
should come in. Everyone should be part of it. Man, women, however people identify, everyone should be allowed, or not allowed, not even just allowed, but like invited into the circle.
Right. Well, because ultimately we're all souls anyway, like you were saying, and you know,
Yeah.
um one question I guess I have for you, you know, the dress of females in ISKCON is kind of modest, you know, and I think that, you know, when we talk about objectification of women, I think the Western society in this day and age has kind of perceived, you know, that women, let's just take like Instagram models, for example, that they, you know, they flaunt what they were born with, you know. And so do you see that as something that's like empowering to women, or do you see that as something that's ultimately objectification?
So the objectification is something that happens from the outside. So it can be empowering to wear a full burqa. It can be empowering to cover your head and wear a sari. It can be empowering to wear a bikini. What's empowering is that the woman has a choice about how she is presenting herself.
Hmm.
So agency, meaning like choice, agency is like one of those weird like words that I didn't know what it meant. So just in case, agency means like when you get to be the agent of your own decision. So some, you know, at first there was in feminism like, oh, it's so terrible. All of these women that are Muslims, they have to cover their head. That's anti-feminism. But then you realize later on, you like when you get like more mature about it, you realize that for some women, that is the ultimate expression of their choice. And it is the
True.
choice that gives. So for me, I love to wear saris. I like to dress modestly. I don't feel like that empowers me or disempowers me. I mean, there's all sorts of subtle psychological things happening. So I'm sure there are some women and who are either covering their entire body or exposing their entire body who are doing it not from a place of agency. However, I don't think it's a one size fits all. It's really about, you know, this is a really interesting one, because it's not even a question we ask men. Do you feel more empowered wearing shorts, or do you feel more empowered wearing pants? Like, no one ever asks
I'll
men
just
that
wear what I
question.
want to.
Yeah, that you wear what you want to. Exactly. You just wear what you
But
want to. So
simultaneously, out of respect for, you know, women and societal norms, I wouldn't go out in like a speedo or a, you know, completely nude or anything like that.
right, but like in Germany, people do that all the time, and like no one thinks it's weird, and like no one's even like, you know, it's a cultural thing. I'm just specifically naming that because literally I was in Germany, and like I was an exchange student in Germany, and I was like, oh, that's a grown man totally naked on the beach. Okay, that's how it works here. So, you know, some of the societies which are the most equal in terms of male and female, where people have like the most equality, are like the cultures where nudity, it doesn't matter at all, you know, where it's
Mm.
like just a non-factor. So, and then there are women like, like in my cohort at graduate school who are, they adherents to Islam, and they, cover. But I don't think like this woman is a sucker. I think she's an empowered woman who has a religious faith
I mean, that's good that you
that
don't.
makes her feel
Yeah.
like she's a full person, and she's choosing this. And so I think that women have to be, it's the agency of the woman. So whether you're covered or uncovered is irrelevant. It's really like how you decide to present yourself. And so I think that's the main thing. And when we stop thinking of women as objects, but actually the subject, that where they are their story is the story being told, rather than we're telling a story about them, then they can wear whatever the hell they want, and they do. And it may be that you know there's an assumption that when a woman is wearing whatever, they're trying to get attention, but that is not actually factual. That is just that's a patriarchal assumption. That is not, like, if you were to study it and research it and interview women, they would say no to that. Wait, let's see. I was rewatching the New
Let's
York
talk about
Times
108 a
documentary.
little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, stuck out in that era when the scene was seemingly at its most violent. Okay. Yeah, we weren't violent. I don't think.
Um, yeah, let's talk about 108 a little bit. So, I
Okay.
mean, what was the basis for the inception of 108? I mean, I know Raj used to play in Inside Out. How, Rob was in Resurrection and whatnot. How did you guys all come together to form the group?
So basically, I think we were like talking about this because I didn't know the whole history, but Vic was in Shelter, and then he started 108. Rob started to sing for 108, and I played guitar, and I lived at the Temple. I was like, like people knew I was like a hardcore kid or whatever. So actually, I think my husband was like, Rob, you got to get Chris from Resurrection to come drum, and then like basically he was like equal vision, so he kind of suggested, why don't you get Kate to play guitar? So we all lived at the Philly Temple, and we're just trying to remember back, and of course, like no one remembers anything, but basically, like we were going to go on tour with Shelter, and we went and practiced for a week, and then we went on tour. So basically, I owned a guitar, I played guitar, and I think also it was the beginning of this movement toward, like, a lot of people were like, I don't want to join the Krishnas, they're so sexist, and we were like, well, actually, we're going to do whatever we want, and it's not going to be that. We're going to shut that down, so women feel like they want to be part of this society, which offers so much, in terms of living a happy, like, fulfilled life. So 108 was kind of like the art nerds of the Temple High School, and Fred Kishore was and Rob, both of them, because they wrote a lot of the lyrics. They super brilliant at taking these, like, esoteric, like, things from Bhagavatam, and turning them into hardcore songs. Like, very, Shelter had more of the idea of, like, let's talk about what is the feeling of the material world and what Krishna consciousness does to change that. And 108 went just like deep into esoterica, and also really, I think, talked a lot. A lot of our lyrics are really about, like, the deep frustration of a material world, and then even like, okay, now we've found Krishna consciousness, but we're still struggling to really find a way to cast off all of this material conditioning and just commit ourselves, like, hook, line, and sinker in a very deep way to this process. So, like, the holy name is about the struggle of chanting, actually. And, I was thinking about just, what is, like, the frustration and the struggle of trying to be a devotee with so much material conditioning. So I think 108 held that space. And I think it was also just like, and was and is, musically really an interesting. I can say this because I don't really write the music, so I can toot horn of the music. Like, Raj Kishore he's brilliant, and then Trivikram did a lot of the later writing of music, and like they're incredible musicians. So I think it held that space of like pretty powerful music with pretty powerful message. But I mean, what was I going to do?
Was
Beat
your
people up?
what's that?
So what was I going to do? Beat people up in the mosh pit? I mean, I was like, that's so dumb. Why would you do that? I mean, there's some
I
pretty
remember
badass women
watching
now, but I didn't
the
want to do
108
that.
documentary and Rob throwing fists at somebody that was in something. It's like, oh wow, this is crazy. But what was probably your most interesting tour experience from being with 108? What's a because surely that had to be interesting being a
Oh yeah.
hardcore devotee, and then going and playing with your conventional hardcore bands in the conventional scene, or even just being on the road.
I mean, we kind of maintained this, like, I don't even know how we had the willpower to maintain this devotional standard on the road where we were like chanting all our rounds and like, we wouldn't eat anything that wasn't like totally bona fide. And we were like so crazy, like we were so fanatical at that time. So, yeah, I mean, basically it was hard, it was like hard. We were like kids and we're struggling and we're trying to like, I'm in the van with these people that are like brahmacharis. And like, I didn't even get to know like Raj because we didn't really talk because you weren't supposed to, which I find to be really strange and
That
not
is wild.
helpful. Yeah. And, I think the funniest story, the funniest, most hilarious story is that when we played up in Umia with Refused, there was like something happened, and there was like, or maybe it wasn't Umia. I can never remember, but basically the police came after and they took Rab to jail. They arrested Rab and took him to jail in Sweden for inciting a riot. And when Rob got to jail in Sweden, he's like, it looked like an IKEA catalog. And I was like, he was like, I was psyched. I was like, everything was clean, everything was beautiful. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm going to have the best night's sleep of the whole tour. And then we were like, oh no, Rob's in jail. So we went to get him and we went to pick him up. And he was like, oh shit, this sucks. Like, and then, we went back to sleep in some squat or something. But it's always just a funny tour story because like it's just like he's like, yeah, it was like so clean. I had my own space, it was really nice. I mean, the whole like that was cool. Touring with Refused was great. I still friends with those guys and they were like so incredible. It was just the first tour we had we had like one van that was all girls and then they had like a van that was all dudes. And then we had this other like weird devotee guy named Jai who would like travel in this. Actually, I think the guys traveled in the bus, which was like a converted school bus. And then they would set up and he would make khichdi and halava like every day. We were like, oh my God. But it was fun. We had a great time and we, at the time we were going to like bust out this countercultural revolution and like everyone in the world was going to join the Krishna temple. But, so we were emboldened with youthful enthusiasm and like an unrealistic sense of that there was going to be like a worldwide revolution that we were leading. And yet to this day, there's still people that come up to me even at these recent shows we did, who say like, I became a devotee because of 108 or Shelter, which is like crazy to me. It's generations. It's like multiple generations deep of that. And that.
So, well, yeah, and that totally makes sense too. Well, yeah, and that totally makes sense too, because you look at it from a perspective of, Trivikram is in here. Very cool. Alexandra says hi.
Hi, Trivikram. Oh, hi, Alex. Hi, Alex. Alex is Trivikram's daughter, and she's like probably going to be in 108 soon at the rate she's going. She's only 4, but she's like, she already like a really talented musician and stuff. Like she's really amazing. That's awesome. His kids are amazing.
Yeah, I know he does that, the music therapy, which is pretty awesome.
Totally.
What I was saying though was that, it for people that are kind of on the outskirts, like hardcore kids, when they see something like people dressed in traditional Vaishnav gear, it might be a little attractive to them, but it also might be a little bit alien to them. And so when they see people that are, just normal hardcore kids, but hey, we've got a different, set of beliefs and ethics and whatnot, then in that way, that can bring them to the philosophy. It's the, the dovetailing of the hardcore scene into Krishna consciousness, I think, is probably what attracts them.
Yeah, I think it's that. And I think it's, some people need to hear a quiet class and, like come into like a meditation where everyone's like sitting quietly, and for them that appeals to them. And that there are some people that just need the full volume, like, you know, everything all out on the table, hanging out there, kind of version of it. And
Yeah.
the truth is that broad spectrum of like what's attractive is really sort of like, it's necessary, it's needed. So
And
108,
music's
it's
awesome, so that helps
music.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some people think it's awesome. Some people hear it and they're just like, what the hell is this? But for
Yeah.
us, for me, for sure, that music, when I play it, fulfills a part of me that nothing else fulfills. And so I'm guessing that the people who are in the quote unquote audience, who really are very much exactly a part of the show as much as the band is, and that relationship that's happening, I feel like we're all in this kind of space together. And for me, it does exactly what meditation wants to do, which is that it creates a space where the mind is is empty, is emptied out. Like in Buddhist mindfulness meditation, the mind would just be like an empty bowl. And then in Krishna consciousness, we have a different interpretation. Have you heard the word narod? Narod? Like in the beginning of yoga, the Yoga Sutras, it says yogascha vritti narodaha. It says yoga is the stilling of the changing states of the mind. And it says, like in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that the yogi's mind is like the flame of a candle in a room with no wind. So when you're on stage or in the audience and the band is playing, and you I mean, I think this is probably true, there's nothing except what's there at that exact moment. There's nothing happening external. There's nothing. And then in the Bhakti tradition, like this is very specifically Pushti Marg, which is like a twin sampradaya to the Chaitanya sampradaya. Same thing, Radha Krishna incarnation, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm going to answer that after this because that's a good question.
Ben says, who are your hardcore punk metal musical influences?
Wait, I didn't get to say the Pushti thing. The Pushti thing is
go ahead.
Narod means when the mind entirely stops, except it's filled with Krishna consciousness. So in yoga, like the mind is it's just like focusing on the Atman. But in Krishna, like in that idea of Narod and Pushti, is the mind is blank, except it's filled with Krishna. And when I'm playing guitar in 108, it's like actually the space where I can do that. So what are my metal and hardcore influences? Okay, I love that question. It's funny because until I was in 108, I wasn't really like into metal, but now I love Obituary.
Nice.
I know. I'm like such a middle-aged mom that one time I said to a guy at like this like vegan Oktoberfest thing, I said, "Oh, I love your jacket." And he's like, "You love my jacket?" He was wearing an Obituary jacket, and like I get made fun of for that so much. And in terms of hardcore, like I really loved old school New York hardcore. Like I loved Agnostic Front, and Trivikrama was like playing Agnostic Front and singing it the whole way from Boston. But I also loved a lot of the DC hardcore, and I think maybe that could be just based on the fact that it was a little more like open to like female energy. So I loved, I love Minor Threat, and I love Rites of Spring and Swizz, and I liked a lot of old punk music like The Clash, and I liked they were a punk band before they became a little mainstream, and I liked Stiff Little Fingers, and yeah, I mean those were like what I Dag Nasty is probably my all-time favorite hardcore band.
Dag Nasty is so awesome.
Yeah, so awesome. And I just went to see Bad Religion like 2 days or 3 days ago. So I love Brian Baker. He's like my guitar hero. So
Yeah.
But and I saw them. I saw Bad Religion one time at an Eagles Lodge in Albany, and I saw Dag Nasty even like at a, you know, kind of like a VFW, like in 1986 or something like that. So it's
Mm.
fun to see that people have still kind of made their lives from that. So
Yeah. Do you have any non metal influences? Who do you consider to be I mean, you know, this kind of would seg into, you know, Mantralogy Records, which is, you know, like kirtan based and whatnot. So who do you really jive with that would not be in the metal and hardcore scene?
well, I actually sometimes play with Krishna Das. I play mridanga for Krishna Das sometimes, and sometimes
Mm.
cartels for also. I play cartels and mridanga for Krishna Das's cartel player, who is named Nina Rao, and
Oh, okay.
so I love their music, and I spend a lot of time sitting with them and playing, you know, and but there's a whole bunch of like amazing kirtanwalas. I love Jonavi Harrison, and I put out one of her records.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, and I love, you know, like I pretty much love like all different kinds of kirtan. And I also love, you know, like singer songwriters and some singer songwriters, and I like Nora Jones, and I also love raga, like I love Anushka Shankar, and I love all kinds of like, there's this whole thing called Brooklyn Raga Massive, which is all raga players. And they like meet in churches and they play the 2 to 4 ragas in Brooklyn. And I love that. And I feel like that puts you in that space of like this empty space. It's just Krishna, only you sitting, residing with Radha and Krishna. Like, so all of those things, it sounds funny, but 108 is really influenced by that type of intention and music, actually. So it might sound like metal, but then the other night when everybody was here, we were playing just quietly, acoustically, and I was like, this sounds like raga almost.
Mm.
So it's very interesting, you know, just this like, you know, like if you take out all the distortion and you could just hear this, I feel this mood, and it's like raga. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
like that's
awesome.
actually to me, you know, like that deep, like where you're, raga means to color the mind. So to actually, so the mind is there, and it's like this, you know, the mind is whatever you put in your mind, by the way, you take with you to your next lifetime. I always thought you
Exactly.
left your mind, but you don't. So it stays with you forever, and then just different impressions rise up, and that's what creates karma, and also creates your jati, your ayur, and your bhog, like your body, your lifespan, and the type of life you live is created by these impressions on the mind. So raga
True.
colors the mind with in the right time, in the right spirit, the right time of day, with the right mood, so that you're like the best type of meditation can be awakened. And I think when if you were to hear 108 music just played acoustically, it sounds like raga to me. So
Yeah, I
that's
could totally
important.
see that.
Yeah, yeah.
And you guys just did some shows with Judge recently. How was that?
So incredible. We had like the best time ever. We had this like 20-minute laughing yoga session that by accident, because Trivakram is like freaking hilariously funny. And someone gave Purcell this, it was like a mailman's shirt, and they drew like the Judge, you know, logo on the back. And so Trivakram said, hey, you guys, you should like do like tonight on stage, you should do an impromptu skit where Purcell dresses up as a mailman, and he comes in with a bag and delivers an envelope to Mike Judge, and then Mike Judge opens it, and it's a set list. And we, for whatever reason, because we'd had like 3 days of not sleeping, and then we just started to laugh, like everyone in the van, and there were like 15 of us, and we could not stop laughing. Like tears were like streaming down our cheeks. We were laughing so hard, and it was this most. And then Mike Judge just says, he's in the front seat, he just turns around and says, what if drama is my calling? You know, it's like, so they're like amazing people. Like Mike Judge is an amazing human being.
Yeah.
And Charlie was so cool and lent me his guitar the one night, and like just the whole thing. Like one morning we had like basically like a high tea at the vegan restaurant. Like we went and
Yeah.
we were like, either this is like really weird, or like it was really nice. You know, we've kind of all grown up together, so it was
That's
amazing.
awesome.
And then of course Judge is amazing, like as a hardcore
Yeah.
band, and their message is amazing, and they were super supportive. like they watched us, they were cool, like they were, you know, they like had our backs and we had theirs, and it was just like everything we were kind of hoping that to be. I felt, you know, there's this really great picture, and it's like Sammy is like showing out, you know, Triple Crump's daughter the drumsticks, and she's holding them, and then she would come
Wow.
out and she was doing like a little mosh for the bands. So it was just like a family, you know, like a great, like being a big family. Incredible, just incredible.
Yeah, Purcell's a great guy. I know he doesn't feel the same about me, but hopefully that'll change someday. um, you know, we've only got a few minutes left, and I know that we have some time constraints today. So,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
I wish we could have gone
we
deeper
could
into.
go a few minutes over. It's okay if you want to,
Okay.
if you still have, yeah.
Um, uh, what do you know, I always ask this question to people, like, as far as, you know, media is concerned, you know, what are you reading? What are you watching? What do you do to unwind? How do you make sense of all the craziness in the world? What do you do?
Hmm. So I have been reading so many books. I'm reading a lot of like at the moment. I'm reading a lot of books that relate to the topic that that I was talking about, which is anthropology, and also
Mhm.
a lot of the old sociological books on the Hare Krishnas. But um, I like when I was reading tonight, I was reading this little book called Loving Wisdom, which is by my friend Shamdas. Um,
Mm.
I unwind by doing a lot of yoga asana. Actually, I've been diving really back into some pretty like hard, like I take these like, it's not hot yoga, but it's like warm yoga, which is funny. It's like
Okay.
80 degrees. So you're like sweating and you're like, the studio that I go to is like, they do a lot of chanting and they do a lot of meditation and pranayama. Um, and then I like sit down at my harmonium and I chant and I play guitar and I take a lot of long walks. And then, you know, sometimes I watch some like, I try like maybe some comedy like on TV, and I actually really like historical fiction, which is like hilarious and really dorky. But um and yeah, I can't make any sense of like some of the stuff that's happening in the world right now. I can't make any sense of it whatsoever because the history is so complicated and so crazy and insane. And so I like look for the moments when there are things that I can do. Like, you know, one of my friend Nina is she's the one that I said she manages Krishna Das, and I spend a lot of time with that family, the Neem team. And in the end, you know, he gave 3 instructions. He said, you have to love everyone, everyone, no exceptions. 2, you need to feed everyone. And 3, you need to serve everyone. And so um, I can't exactly fix what is happening in the Middle East, for instance. And I even have relatives who are literally in bomb shelters in Tel Aviv right now. And yet I do not in any way support what's happening there, but the Israeli government is completely right wing and insane. So what do? I write to my mom's, it's my stepmom's cousin, and I chant for her. And I, you know, because there seems to be no better way than to actually address it through Krishna consciousness, is where you let go of bodily distinctions. Now, how do you fight
Mm.
if you have no bodily distinctions and you don't consider yourself part of a nation, but you consider yourself an Atman? How do you fight? So that's so dicey, it's hard to get into. But I will say that my
Yeah.
prayer is for peace, and that is what I will
Yeah.
stand by. You know that we need peace, and we need and there was lots of effort for that. At the same time that there's lots of effort for war, there's a lot of effort for peace, and so I align
Mm.
myself with those teachings. And I will feed people as much as possible. I do. So I on Monday nights I go to Food Not Bombs, and I've been bringing supplies for the
Oh, it's still
people.
around.
And yep. So there's Albany Food Not Bombs, which is right near here, and you can bring a pot of khichdi, and they'll serve it to people, and people
Mm.
line up for that. And so I'm trying to participate in ways like that. Like what is this instruction to feed people? People will come here, but also you can feed people that have no food. You know, there's Albany Free Fridge, which is like addresses food scarcity. So I
Mm.
will make khichdi for tonight, and then I'll package it up and I'll put it in the free fridge, and then people can come take it. And I just try
No,
to
that's
do
wonderful.
like local actionable things because nothing else makes sense to me right now.
Mm.
So yeah, that's just it. I don't know exactly how to make sense of it, but that's where I'm at with it.
That's awesome. No, I mean that's really wonderful, giving the people the
Yeah,
benediction of Krishna Prasad, people who wouldn't
yeah.
ordinarily receive it otherwise.
All food not bombs is vegan. So you
Yeah,
just like
no, I
some of it's
remember them from back
vegetarian,
in
so
the
it's
day.
cool. Yep, it's still going. It's going on all over the world, and it's like a great way to do like some kind of actionable, like activism, basically, like where you go and you're like you do direct actions, or you bring
Yeah,
food and you hand it to people, and and all of the food is supposed to be made from either people donate it, or it comes from things that would otherwise be thrown out. So that makes sense to me, as in terms of like, if you can do something for the world, then you can feed people.
mm, yeah.
So
No, that's beautiful. And talking about media, the devotees have a lot of problems with Hollywood cinema and whatnot, and that's kind of one of the ways that I unwind and decompress, in addition to
I just don't
chanting
worry
and
about that so much, because like, what are we gonna? We're gonna be Mahabhagavats. We're like, just most of us are just trying to like make it through the day, and
get
like,
by.
okay, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, like, being a brahmachari, I didn't watch movies for 2 years, and that's hard because
yeah,
when you come from that's another thing too. When you come from a career trajectory of performance, I think a lot of the devotees' expectations is that you should just give all that up, and it's like, well, if I'm if that's where I get my money from, and my aspiration is to be, a grihasta, a householder, well, then why would I cut off that supply completely? Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. I just don't think you need to be. I personally don't. I don't try to be fanatical about it. I try to not be fanatical about anything. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
So I just don't worry too much about all that. Like, the longer I kind of stick around and Krishna doesn't kick me out, then I think I just don't worry so much about all the things. Like, you're not going to like follow rules. You're not going to get back to Godhead, or you're not going to like attain enlightenment by following rules. Like, that doesn't make any
Right.
sense. So, the rules are there to guide us and maybe help us, and maybe you don't want to fill your mind with, you don't want to like have all these impressions on the mind, so you maybe choose what you watch with that in mind, and maybe sometimes you just do it
Sure.
anyway. Like, so I just don't think we need to judge ourselves so much. I think that we spend, I don't see it as valuable, and I see it as, actually I see it as the opposite of valuable. It's
Yeah.
detrimental. It's detrimental to the process. Just like, you know if we're part and parcel of Krishna, then should we be judging ourselves all the time? I don't think so. I don't think we need
Yeah.
to. And like, what we should be doing is, can be following to the degree that we can sustain it. So if we're doing stuff like that, a lot of people, like, they throw themselves into the celibate ashram and then they can't really sustain it. Most people don't. There's a very few people that
I did not.
go from brahmacharya to sannyas. Very few, like 0.01%. So the rest of us are all
Hmm.
here. Why not just be kind and be loving, and do loving, service for others, and take care of our children, and feed friends, and enjoy kirtan, and go to shows together, and like, share food, and all of the things that makes society and living in society really good. I think
Yeah.
that's the better way. That's what if I was to design an ashram, and like, we kind of joke about this, like when we get old, the women, we're just going to have an ashram where we just, every morning we wake up and we make a bunch of food. Anyone that wants to come in can come in. They can eat whoever they are off the street, anyone. And then we don't, I don't know if you know this text, Narada Bhakti Sutras. You know Narada Bhakti Sutras?
I'm familiar, but I don't think I've read it.
So there's one verse in the Narada Bhakti Sutras, and there's only 84 aphorisms, but one of the aphorisms says, philosophical points should never be argued between the devotees, because there are so many points of view.
Mm.
And it's really interesting, because I was like, oh, okay. And it also says that instead of that, the true way of attaining bhakti is to just become like a vessel, And then bhakti will naturally pour in. And it is by, according to that text, it is by the grace of the guru that you will that Krishna consciousness will be awakened. And once you start thinking, it's my effort, I'm following the rules, I'm doing this, I'm becoming Krishna conscious, then you're just an ego on the ego platform. It's actually totally contradictory to true bhakti. So true bhakti is that you become a receptacle of grace, and and grace arises through, grace will naturally spontaneously rise with no cause. That's the definition of grace. But there's also grace that comes in addition to that from serving other people. And we shouldn't, I don't think we should divide people into devotees and non-devotees. So if I go to Food Not Bombs, and anyone that comes in the door, I should be seeing Krishna in the heart. I shouldn't be thinking this person's not a devotee. That's not right. That's actually incorrect.
Yeah, it's antithetical to Krishna consciousness. I agree.
The Krishna consciousness, we're all devotees, and some of us have forgotten, but we're all on the equal platform, and that we all have the opportunity to have relationship with supreme divinity in the form of Radha and Krishna, or however you want to call them. Whatever you want to call them.
Humble sage sees with equal vision.
Exactly.
The dog, the outcast. Yeah.
So
I know I just butchered that. But
if you can strive for that and seeing people with that in your mind, then it would correct also all the issues with objectification of women. It would correct who would you fight if you didn't think of yourself as this on this side of an artificial political line, or that side of an artificial political line, but you saw people on the Atman platform. Who would you fight? You couldn't.
You wouldn't.
You wouldn't.
Totally.
It's all based on false identification with the material body. It's just what it is. I always want to look for political solutions, and it just comes down to that. It just does.
It really does. And it's 1:08 right now.
All right, so that sounds like a good time.
Might be an apt time to end the show.
Yes.
One thing I want to do real quick before we go is plug my merchandising line. This is Hell's Heart Co. Hell's Heart Co. on Instagram. We've got some movie themed T-shirts. I'm going straight to hell for these. From Scream, these ones glow in the dark. And also, and you might be interested in this, Kaylee, 10th Canto. This is my devotee line that I started. And as you can see, it's he's got a little Joppa bag and T-lock on there. So
oh my God, I need one of those. That's very cool.
Yeah, I'll have to get your contact info after, and I'll shoot one your way. But is there anyone you want to plug, or any projects that you've got coming up, or any shows that you wanna let the audience know about?
Yeah, I'm doing the Women of the Pit are having an art show at C Squat in New York City. And it's the weekend of November. I hope I got this right. 17th, 18th, and 19th.
Yeah,
and they will. If you really want to know, you can look at their thing, because I'm always like saying the wrong dates. It's like one of the things I offer to the yoga world and the hardcore world. So I'm gonna do I'm gonna play the Project Kate songs, and I have some new songs, and I'm gonna just
nice.
I'm gonna play those at the art show, and I think there's a chance my daughter Budgie, who lives in New York City, is going to come sing with me too. So that might be fun for anybody. So I have that, and then I have nothing for a while, which is kind of nice also.
No more 108 shows for a while?
So we're trying to organize shows. It's hard because Vic lives in Japan, so we can't play all the time because we have to bring him far. But we're setting up a tour in Europe in the summer that's in process, and I can't say until it gets closer when that will be, but you can keep your eyes open for that. And then so that's happening. So thank you very much for having me. I don't know if
thank you for coming. I wish we could have dived deeper into more of the intricacies of the way that ISKCON operates and whatnot, but there's always time for round 2 down the road. So like I said, I've got a merch company, Hell's Heart Merch Co. Thanks for everybody for joining the chat. If you haven't already, like, comment, share, subscribe. And we're supposed to be doing a show with Lord Ezek. I meant to mention that we had some scheduling conflicts and we had to reschedule. So that's going to be this coming Saturday at 3 p.m. But you know, I love everybody that was here. And Keli Lalita, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you
And
very much.
namaste, job bless, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Okay, Haribo, Haribo.